Last summer, my wife and I weighed 340 pounds of tomatoes off 12 plants. The plants were 8 feet tall. The fruit was so heavy, I had to double stake every cage. And the only thing I did differently from my neighbors was a single dollar's worth of powder dusted into each planting hole in May. Eli showed me this 30 years ago. He learned it from his father, who learned it before the Second World War. 22 states have since written rules that make it almost impossible to buy in quantity at a garden center, and the bag at the feed store has half the strength it used to. Stay with me to the end, because I will tell you the exact ingredient, the exact amount per plant, and the one thing you must never pair it with. Now, I want to be straight with you about where this powder came from and who pushed it out of reach. The mineral itself is soft rock phosphate, and it has been mined out of the ground in Central Florida since the late 1800s. Those Florida hard rock phosphate mines supplied feed mills and farm co-ops across this country for over 100 years. Eli's father bought it by the sack in the 1930s. I know that because Eli once pulled a yellowed paper receipt out of a barn ledger and showed it to me. The receipt was from a feed mill not 10 miles from here, and the strength rating on that old bag was nearly twice what you can buy today. Eli walked me over to that same feed store back in the early 1990s and pointed at the sack on the pallet. He said, "That is the one. That is what makes the tomatoes climb." That was the whole lesson. The gating did not happen by accident. In 2002, Minnesota passed the first state phosphorus lawn fertilizer law. It was aimed at runoff into the lakes, and on its own terms, it made sense. But once Minnesota set the template, the Chesapeake Bay states followed through the 2010s. Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, New York. Then the Great Lakes states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois. 22 states, all writing rules that swept up consumer phosphorus amendments alongside the lawn fertilizer the laws were actually written for. The pre-suppression sack ran 27 to 30% total P2O5. The bag at the feed store today is half that, cut with limestone filler. And here's the cost to you. Tomato gardeners now buying bagged amendments at the big box garden center are getting half strength product or no phosphorus at all. Their plants set heavy fruit early, then stall in mid-July. They are losing 50% of the yield that piece of ground could give them, and nobody told them why. So let's get into what the powder actually is, because I have made you wait long enough. The ingredient is soft rock phosphate. You will also see it labeled colloidal rock phosphate, and it is the same thing, a finely ground, naturally occurring phosphate clay mined out of the same Florida deposits the country has been working since the late 1800s. It is not bone meal. It is not superphosphate. It is not the blue powder in the box at the garden center. It is a soft, gray, almost chalky dust that smells faintly mineral, like a whetstone, and it pours through your fingers the way fine flour does. The first time Eli scooped a handful into my palm, he said, "Hold that and tell me what it feels like to a tomato root." I did not know what he meant then. I do now. Here is where you find it. Not the garden center, not the big box store, not the seasonal end cap with the pretty bags and the cheerful tomato on the front. You find soft rock phosphate at livestock feed stores, at agricultural cooperatives, and at the kind of dusty little supply shops that still sell hog rations and fence staples by the pound. A 50-pound sack runs about $24 to $28 depending on where you live. That sack will treat 50 or more planting holes at the dose I am going to give you in a minute. Do the math and you land at roughly $1 per plant. That is the dollar I told you about at the top. Now, you will not see this on the shelf at the big box garden center. There is a reason for that. We will get to it in full a little later, but I want you to sit with the picture for a second. The same mineral that grew the tomatoes Eli's father canned through the Depression is sitting on a pallet at the feed store, 2 miles down the road from a garden center that does not stock it and will not order it for you. It did not vanish. It got moved out of sight. All right, let's keep going. The second thing you need to understand is why this powder works the way it does, because the mechanism is what makes the dose forgiving and what makes the suppression so frustrating. Phosphorus is the limiting nutrient for tomato root mass and for the conversion from flower to fruit. I want to say that again in plain English. If your tomato plant does not have enough phosphorus available to it in the soil, two things happen. The root system stays small, which means the plant cannot pull enough water and minerals to feed a heavy fruit load. And the flowers that do open will set a smaller percentage of fruit, and the fruit they set will be smaller. You can have all the nitrogen in the world and a perfect watering schedule. And if the phosphorus is not there, your plants will give you a respectable yield in June and stall out in mid-July. That is not a watering problem. That is not a variety problem. That is a phosphorus problem. And most gardeners never identify it because the bagged stuff at the store is sold under the name tomato fertilizer, and they assume the box has them covered. Now, here is the part that took me about 10 years to fully understand. Soft rock phosphate is not water soluble in the way a synthetic fertilizer is. You cannot just dump it in and have it leach into the root zone next Tuesday. The way it actually feeds your plant is through mycorrhizal fungi, the microscopic fungal threads that live in healthy garden soil and partner with plant roots in a trade. The fungi extend the plant's reach by many times, and in return for sugar from the plant, they secrete acids that slowly dissolve the phosphate clay and deliver the phosphorus straight to the root. That partnership is what releases the powder over 3 to 5 years. One application, $1 per plant, feeds the same hole through 3 or 4 growing seasons. Eli told me once, you are not feeding the plant. You are feeding what feeds the plant. I wrote that down on the back of an envelope, and I still have it pinned in the tool barn. This is also why this technique could not be killed off, and it is why I want you to pay close attention here. The state laws cannot make the rock illegal. The rock has been mined for 130 years. It is still legal in agricultural quantities, and farmers buy it by the truckload. What the regulations did was gate it out of the consumer retail channel and dilute the consumer grade product with limestone filler, so a single bag could be sold across all 22 states without relabeling. They couldn't kill the rock. They could only kill the bag. And that brings me to the second reason this works the way it does. Because the powder releases slowly, the dose is forgiving. You cannot burn a tomato plant with soft rock phosphate the way you can burn one with a heavy hand of 10-10-10. You can put a heaping tablespoon in the hole, or you can put 2 heaping tablespoons in the hole. And the plant will take what the fungi can deliver and leave the rest in the ground for next year and the year after that. This is the opposite of the input treadmill most gardeners are stuck on, where you feed every 2 weeks because the synthetic stuff washes through the soil with the next rain. One application of the right mineral, in the right place, at the right time, and the plant has what it needs for the season and the next. That is the mechanism. That is why it works. And that is exactly the kind of thing the big box bagged amendment industry does not want sitting on the shelf next to their $14 boxes of soluble fertilizer, because the math does not favor them. $1 a plant once every 3 years against a box you have to buy every spring. That is not a comparison they want a customer making in the aisle. Now let me give you the exact protocol. 2 heaping tablespoons per planting hole. That is roughly 1 ounce, about 30 grams, of the modern half-strength product you will pull off the feed store shelf. If you can find the old strength agricultural grade product through a co-op, cut that in half. 1 heaping tablespoon does the same work. But for what most of you can actually buy, 2 heaping tablespoons is the number. Here is the placement. And this is the part most people get wrong even when they have the powder in hand. Dig your tomato hole the way you normally would for a transplant, about a foot deep for an established 4 to 6 inch start. Drop the 2 tablespoons into the bottom of the hole. Then take a hand trowel and work that powder into the bottom 4 to 6 inches of native soil. You are not dumping it on top. You are not setting the root ball down on it. You are mixing it into the floor of the hole so that the rock is in contact with the living soil below where the fungi live. After you have mixed it in, take 2 inches of plain soil from the side of the hole and cover the amended layer. Then set your root ball on top of that 2-inch buffer. The roots should never touch the powder directly. They will find it as they grow downward, and that is the whole point. The roots reach for the mineral. The fungi solubilize what the roots cannot, and the plant pulls phosphorus on demand for the rest of the season and beyond. Timing. Here in Zone 6B, my last frost is the 3rd week of April. I transplant tomatoes 14 days after that last frost, no earlier. That puts me in the 1st week of May, almost every year. Eli planted by the same rule. I have heard people argue you should go in earlier with wall of water protection, and you can, but I have never had the powder fail at the standard 14-day after frost transplant date. Apply once at transplant. Do not top dress. Do not side dress. The amendment is in the hole. You walk away. Now the result. Last year, my wife and I weighed 340 pounds of tomatoes off 12 plants. The plants stood 8 feet tall in homemade concrete mesh cages I had to double stake by July because the fruit load was pulling them sideways. Average per plant was a hair over 28 pounds. The variety mix was deliberate. 6 Brandywines for slicing, 4 German Johnsons because Eli always grew German Johnsons, and they hold up to the heavy fruit set, and a row of 2 Romas for sauce and canning. All open pollinated, all from the same seed lot I have been saving from for the last 7 years. My neighbor down the road planted from a packet of those same seeds last spring. I gave him the seed myself out of one of my save jars. He grew them the conventional way, with a cup of 10-10-10 in each hole and a side dress of the same in July. He pulled about 9 pounds per plant. Same seed, same season, same rainfall. The only difference was a tablespoon of rock that cost him nothing because I would have given him some if he had asked. And that is the kind of result the standard advice columns will never walk you through. There is one more layer to this, and it is the layer that explains why some of you are going to try this and not get the result I just described. The powder is functionally inert without mycorrhizal fungi. The rock will sit in the hole and do nothing if there is no living fungal network to solubilize it. Most of the people who try this and report back that it did not work for them are first-year converts coming off a decade or more of synthetic fertilizer programs and broad-spectrum fungicides. Both of those practices flatten the fungal community in your soil. The roots can grow into a hole full of rock phosphate and never make the partnership that releases the phosphorus. Here is the fix Eli showed me. When I drop the 2 tablespoons of soft rock phosphate in the bottom of the hole, I also drop a heaping teaspoon of finished compost from my oldest pile, the one that has been sitting and aging for at least 2 years. That old compost is loaded with fungal hyphae. It is not fertilizer, it is an inoculant. I mix it in with the powder, the fungal partners are introduced to the mineral, and by the time the root ball settles in 2 inches above, the system is already alive and waiting. First-year gardeners coming off the chemical program should do exactly this for the first 2 seasons until their soil rebuilds its own community. By year 3, you will not need to inoculate the hole anymore. The whole bed will have come back. Eli used to say the soil remembers. The soil remembers, but only if you stop punishing it. And mycorrhizal partnerships are exactly what the chemical fertilizer programs destroy on the way through. That is not an accident either. Now, what I have shared with you today is a real piece of the puzzle, but it is still just one piece. If you are tired of fighting the same battles every season, if you want a garden that actually works with you instead of against you, then I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol. And it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple, day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. So click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. Or alternatively, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, you can take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. And now that you know the powder, you need to know why it disappeared from the shelf. The thing that pushed soft rock phosphate out of consumer reach was not a single law. It was a wave of state-level phosphorus runoff regulations, and they started with one specific anchor I want to name. In 2002, Minnesota passed the first comprehensive state law restricting phosphorus in consumer lawn fertilizer. The reason was real. Phosphorus runoff into Minnesota's lakes was driving algal blooms, and the bulk of that runoff was coming off lawn applications, particularly along the lake shores. Minnesota was right to act. The states that followed through the 2010s, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, New York around the Chesapeake Bay, then Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois around the Great Lakes, were also responding to real algal bloom problems in real water bodies. I want to be straight with you. That counter-argument is legitimate. Phosphorus runoff from lawn fertilizer applied to a manicured turf next to a lake is a genuine environmental problem, and the laws addressed it correctly. I am not going to pretend otherwise. Here is where the laws caught the wrong target. 22 states now restrict consumer phosphorus fertilizer above trace levels for lawn and garden retail. That regulatory web is what manufacturers had to navigate. And rather than make 22 different SKUs for 22 different state rules, they did the cheap thing. They cut the consumer-grade soft rock phosphate with limestone filler so the bag could legally cross every state line. Pre-suppression product ran 27 to 30% total P2O5 with 18 to 22% available. The modern bag product is roughly half that, about 14 to 16% P2O5, the same name on the bag, half the strength inside. A tablespoon of soft rock phosphate buried 12 inches deep under a tomato plant has effectively zero runoff exposure. It is not the mechanism the laws were written for, but the regulatory machinery does not distinguish between a lakeshore lawn application and a buried garden amendment. One SKU, one set of rules, one diluted bag. The lawn and garden retail chain runs roughly $50 billion in annual sales. The economic incentive was to comply quietly, reformulate everything, and move on. So that is what happened. What the viewer lost is not abstract. The gardener who walks into a big box store today and buys a bag of tomato fertilizer is getting a watered down version of the amendment that made backyard tomatoes legendary in the 1930s, the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s. They wonder why their plants set heavy fruit in June and stall in mid-July. The answer is in the bag they bought. Half-strength powder, no mycorrhizal partner, no slow-release reservoir to pull from when the heat hits. They are losing 50% or more of their potential yield, and they do not know why. Now stay with me, because there is one more thing you need to know. And this is the part of the hook I told you I would come back to. The one thing you must never pair soft rock phosphate with is fresh wood ash. I lost a bed of tomatoes to this exact mistake the year after Eli passed. I had been burning a lot of hardwood that winter. I had a bucket of clean ash sitting by the back door. When I went to plant my tomatoes that May, I thought I would do two good things at once: drop the rock phosphate in the hole and sprinkle a handful of wood ash in there too, since wood ash carries potassium and trace minerals. I planted 12 brandywines that way. By July, those plants were yellowing from the bottom up and barely setting fruit. I pulled less than 4 pounds per plant off that whole bed. It was the worst tomato year I had had in 20 seasons. Here is the mechanism. Wood ash is strongly alkaline, pH 10 to 12 straight out of the stove. It is also loaded with calcium. When you put fresh wood ash and soft rock phosphate in the same planting hole, the calcium binds the phosphorus into tricalcium phosphate, which is a compound the plant cannot access. The amendment you spent your dollar on is locked away for the entire season. The powder is still there, the root reaches it. It does not matter. The chemistry has already taken it off the menu. The workaround is simple. Wood ash is a useful amendment, but only on the surface, and only in fall. Broadcast thin across a bed that you are going to let rest over winter. Never in the planting hole. Never in the same season as a phosphate application. If you have applied soft rock phosphate in May, no wood ash that calendar year, anywhere on that bed. A second never pair item, briefly, fresh manure. The ammonia in fresh manure volatilizes hard in any alkaline pocket and burns young roots. Compost the manure first. 6 months minimum. Then it is safe. Eli used to say a man trying to do two good things at once is usually about to do one bad one. He was right. This pairing mistake, rock phosphate plus wood ash in the same hole, is exactly what kept this technique from spreading by word of mouth back when the powder was sitting on every feed store shelf in the county. Folks tried it once, did it wrong, and quit. The bag got cut in half a generation later, and there was nobody left who remembered the original protocol clearly enough to defend it. All right, before I let you go, I want to point you at one more piece of this. The powder is what powers the plant. The layout is what stacks the production. 340 pounds off 12 plants on a quarter-acre footprint is not an accident. Now, if everything I have shared today resonates with you and you want to take this further than one video can take you, I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. Now, there are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. The second way, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching, either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. A single $1 of soft rock phosphate per planting hole, applied right, mixed deep, kept clear of wood ash and fresh manure, and the tomato yields the bagged amendment industry quietly stopped delivering come right back. You now know an old technique your grandfather's generation took for granted, and ours had to dig through feed store back rooms to find again. Next week, I am walking you through the open-pollinated tomato and bean varieties that quietly disappeared from the seed catalogs after the 1970s, and how to get them back. Eli would have been pleased we are still talking about this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I will see you in the next one.